Welcome to the fine print, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Caleb Tasky, coming at you with another great show tonight. This is fun. My guest tonight is the first person that I met in person when I began covering this story almost 2 years ago. Super excited to have him on here. I do want to do the usual shit off the top here. I want to thank my previous guests, Noah and Marlena Fishman from Zen Barn Farms, Alyssa LeBeau from Faustini Farms and LeBeau Packaging. Doughboy, I still got to get back with you and reschedule here. Tom and Jen McGinty from McGinty's Magical Meds. And I'd like to just call out a couple of things I've got coming up. Also, as usual, on Sunday, I've got Brianna Woodward, who designed my logo. She's just a wonderful human. And I saw she just met Doug Stanhope the other day. I'm super mad about that, Brianna. We're going to talk about that. And then on Tuesday, I've got In-House Genetics coming on the show. On Thursday, I've got Tim Blake from the Emerald Cup coming on the show. On Saturday, I had to reschedule with Tara Evelyn from Fat Nugs Magazine, but Tara's coming on Saturday. Then on Sunday, I've got Charles Stockgill, Charles the Hashishan. I bet some of you guys know him. And then Tuesday the 19th, I've got another PhD chemist coming on the show, Mark Sheldoni, which is going to be I just got a great lineup coming at you guys. I'm fully booked out till the end of February. But today, I don't want to waste any more time. What I want to do is just bang, Vermont Collective. This is the first person that I spoke with personally. I drove to his house. It must have been 2 Januaries ago. It was very close, but it's wait, oh shit. I'm supposed to, there we go. It's Glenn Andersen. Glenn, thank you so much for being here with me tonight, man. Yeah.
It's my pleasure, Caleb. Yeah, and I appreciate it, man. Gratitude. I think when we first met here way back, some mutual connections put us together. And, I think I just saw Joel's interview the other day. You guys, your discussion, fantastic stuff. Things happen in life and, we kind of do these things, right? And it's community and different things happen for different reasons. But to watch your growth, respect for, all of it and for, having us on or me here to speak about some of the work I'm doing for our various ventures and licenses. So I'll try to keep it, super brief, but thank you for having me here, man.
Yeah. And before we get into any of that serious shit, I'm going to put you over there. And I was wondering if you would share with us a 5-minute life story.
Yeah, dude, I've been watching, I saw the Marlena and Noah video earlier. So, and I see, I see the format, man, and it's really evolving well. So I also want to start with giving a shout out to you for your the GoFundMe piece that I just saw on YouTube, man. Well done. And, keep it up. I'm definitely there to help out wherever we can. And I'll share some of the stuff that we're doing here. Maybe start with what, where my life story is today, and then maybe just go backwards through the sort of cannabis space so it's not too long-winded. Because I know there's that reality, right? We could go on forever, and I think that's this community. I think it breeds so many beautiful discussions. And, we could focus on negative stuff, and we could focus on positive stuff. And I think when I think about this community, for me, it's like when we're all at our best, and we're enjoying each other's produce, if you will, and work in general. It's not just growers, right? It's all the supply chain. And so I think when we're all sort of in that space of, whether it's small groups here and groups there or contests here, I saw you got, Tim from Emerald Cup coming up in the future. Now, well done. Like just so many good pieces that I think are bringing the outside world of cannabis here. And so to go backwards to what Joel was saying, Joel and I went to UVM. Together with, say, like I think you guys were talking about Dave Zuckerman and just like a whole group of people that, we're all standing on the shoulders of the people that came before us, right? And I kind of tried to move things forward as much as I could. And, we could go through the list of stuff starting from, UVM and phototrons in our closets and trying to, work with RAs to like normalize this concept that it doesn't kill the way grain alcohol the dorm over does, right? And there's different ways of looking at how we all advocate, and I just want to give props and respect to all those that came before, and recognizing that we all have different strengths, right? So from that vantage point, I've seen a lot of negative stuff happen in this industry, and a lot of really good relationships break apart. And that's over 30 years of living here in the backcountry of Waterbury, Vermont. After UVM, that's pretty much where I've settled down as base camp. And I've got 3 kids, one of which my son is at Chicago now in the design world and doing art. And he went to Castleton's cannabis course. He was, I think, one of the youngest, and he just was a senior in high school, and he signed up for it. And I don't think anybody was really thinking about the semantics of him being 17. But it happened, and he got the certificate, and it was a fantastic course. So, I'm grateful for everybody that's part of the chain of educating and informing. So, I hope that communicates mostly. And, when we first met, I kind of felt this need to sort of be anonymous at the time and not really go on record, if you recall. But I really felt my role for what was happening was to try to help be a guide in a way, and not just to sort of reiterate what you knew already from your family history, but there's a lot of sensitive information, and all of it at a time of this transition from the gray market into this new reality. So all of my work has been trying to bring legacy folks a voice in Montpelier, where for whatever privileges I've been afforded in life, and there are many, I am always grateful for being able to be where I'm at here and now. It's not easy. There's a lot of stuff that I could vent about. It was a hard year. And I was able to help a neighbor transition in her senior years out of a very large house, and just it derailed a lot of progress. And there's all these things that we'll get into with the CCB, but out of it, I have a few ventures, and some are for profit. A tier 1 partnership in a minority capacity with my business partner Mark at Momark Farms, tier 3. We didn't scale out to max. Right on, man. I appreciate the plug. But we have a beautiful crop, and we're in the process of getting tested over at Be It. I just quick shout out at they're so on it. Like, I didn't want to try to compromise. I'm trying to figure out when are we going to get the test back without trying to be too like can we get it for the show? But there's a reality when everybody's stepping up and doing professional work and not sort of being the like status quo of what we see elsewhere. It's refreshing, but I'm also like the first person to point out the devil in the details. So I don't intend to hold back, but I definitely also have been burnt from a lot of forward advocacy in the comments mostly, right? Social media 2008 through 2010, it was a different landscape. And to call out legislators and tag them and have state troopers show up at your house, because you were literally no ad hominems, no threats, just talking about their actual policy being written. Those are things that you can see how the intimidation of enforcement, but also the creation of statutes and all of it tied together. I tried to do as much research as possible with our collective. I tried to gather data that would help the discussions. I wasn't as necessarily trying to champion specific legislation in bills that existed in Montpelier, but we actually wrote, I have collected all of our members' different inputs and, for tax rates. And a lot of that stuff got picked up. I published it online, and it got picked up in the work that the CCB did. So, I'm not trying to say that it was not received at all, but I do think that a lot of it that we see problems with today, we could have not had those issues. So instead of looking backwards and saying shoulda, coulda, woulda, I'm in the space. If I got these for-profit entities, I think Waterbury Falls Manufacturing Company is a tier 2 manufacturing. We just got the license this last month. I don't know if you have the graphic, but it's one of those things where that one is my license, and
I don't have a graphic for that one. I got the Momark Farms.
Yeah, dude. And then that's just it. There's 2 licenses in cannabis, And so those are the things that they're just startups, right? One's a tier 3, but it's like, all sorts of limitations because of a late start. But as we scale out, we have the opportunity to, I think, advocate for a lot of farming issues. So, I did a bunch of that down in Montpelier as we were working up to the legislation. And I think then along came Vermont Growers Association, not getting into the politics of, all the issues involved. You can name a bunch of different organizations and groups and connections around this Vermont industry, right? And as many people that I could say have problems with people, there's also really great relationships with people. And so I try to not be, focused on the politics of it. Because, I mean, literally, the story. I'm not going to get too deep in it. There's a court case coming up. My son and I, he's half my age, 21, and we both have no stalking orders in a situation that I don't want to bias the court case. I'm not looking to, make waves. But, I want to see all of us move forward, man, because it's just like, it's tiring. Joel hit the point, I think, pretty well in your interview with him. It just gets really tiring after a while. So I want us just all move forward, and I'm really stoked to just try to bring what we're doing on the for-profit side forward with this Kinship Certified, where, throughout all the advocacy work, my intent was always to make sure that there's low and no cost medicine and sacrament for not just our members, but people that need it, right? And so many people are stepping up to the plate. So I love seeing, a lot of these companies that a year ago I was questioning what would this legal regulated landscape look like. And I've just seen so many great things in this last year, while our own situation was just so impacted by just a lot of drama. So, my goal ultimately is to then also do our nonprofit work, which is this Kinship Certified, so that the profits of 5% of each sale that we're making have an impact on making that vision possible. So, I posted some of that on the Vermont Collective site. I'm in a capacity right now where I'm trying to openly engage people to come be part of it. So it is far more collective. But at a certain point in the gray market, there's always the need to have a point of contact, if you will. And, because of my past doing research for the state of Vermont, at a much larger level, my consulting company, the Dihedral Group, I've done a lot of work internationally. 125 countries, a lot of languages, yada, yada. I was lucky to be with a lot of great teams that all help make these opportunities happen. And then, it's just because people, you feel a little bit more emboldened to speak up and say, no, this isn't right. Why are we, where is this legislation thing going, right? And if, you mentioned the other day in this pre-interview, right, how some of the CCB member board were like kind of rolling eyes when I'd comment. And the truth of the matter is, I was definitely taking an extreme position to counter some other really extreme positions that were just stupid and ludicrous, and they still are, and they always will be called out, because we know what this plant's about. I'm not going to try to evangelize here, but I am a reverend. I could go all day long, but you and I know I'm not going to go there today. My goal is to just kind of hopefully connect. I'll do a short pitch now, and then hopefully we can have a conversation. I could ask you some questions too, because man, your community's smart. I've seen some of these videos, and everybody's just on, with where they're headed and what they're thinking about. So, I'd love to be able to say, you've asked all these questions of everybody. What do you think, right? Because it's as valuable of an input to this whole equation. And I think the CCB should really be listening to that as well. So, all of those points of
I pulled that up here. I pulled that up
word,
here too for you, Glenn. Yeah, I'm not sure what that's about, but you sent that to me, and while you were talking, I pulled up that graphic. Yeah.
Yeah. So Dihedral Group, that's my consulting company, and basically I've been doing that for a long time. And I've done judicial evaluations for the state of Vermont. I did a lot of pro bono work for the Defender General's office here in Vermont. It's an interesting time because from a legal perspective, here I've been advocating a lot for Defender Generals and for many of our people that are being targeted in, all across America. I think Vermont's a different story, but I'm not trying to specifically get into the deep of like, this group of people, right? But like in the bigger picture, I think we're all as a human race coming to this idea that like, okay, uh, we're the adults at the table, and all the others that were filming propaganda films about how this is going to make us all crazy, they're gone. And when somebody's sitting there talking about cannabis making people schizophrenic, when we all know in the community that it is one of the best tests for discovering who is most susceptible to schizophrenia, but it's not a be all and end all cause, right? So correlation versus causation. And so when you hear people talking about science and technical like bullshit, you got to call it out. And that's just what I was doing. And I think it makes enemies. I think political parties fucking hate me sometimes because, well, no, they do. Because what they do is just so. And, I'm not going to be that person ever. And that bothers some people. But it is the reality where I think if we're not authentically creating our own truth, we're lying. I mean, so this is coming from a reverend. I'm ordained. I can preach, but also it's not even like about that. It's just simply about being human. We're denying these rights across the country. Like I forget how good we have it in Vermont, so we could complain all day about the process, and man, I could tell you some things that happen that if I were to blame the CCB, knowing what I know now, it would be rash and premature. But I also understand that at that time there was shit happening that like, it feels like your whole world is fucking on test because you
Well,
got deadlines.
Glenn, can I stop you for a second? Because it
Yeah,
does seem, to what you just said, it does seem like, in my opinion, a lot of the shitty rules came from the legislature and were just passed down to the CCB.
Yeah, you're 100%. But like, if I was to sort of like jump into that world of Dihedral Group consulting part of the 5 minute, like that probably is past that by now. But ultimately that Dihedral Group piece was, where I was just trying to use the consulting powers of a platform that, did some work and had some connections. I was also just trying to let people realize that like, we're so far behind the times that it was almost like I was accosting people online because they were still trying to understand what was the social media medium all about. And then if you tag somebody, it's just one of those things where I'm in a different capacity now, where there's some not-for-profit work that we're doing that keeps it humbled and grounding, and service oriented towards others. But then there's also the reality of wanting to create our every other event series this summer. So before I forget, and then I'll just close up the pitch of what I've done beyond the advocacy, and then circle back to whatever you want to get to, man. There's just this idea that I think we want to be in a space where here at Meadow House, I've lived here for 3 decades. It's a cannabis friendly place where
It's a beautiful fucking spot, Glenn.
thank you, man. I appreciate you, Caleb. And I love sharing it with people. We've done it many times over with a lot of folks, and we had a July 2018 party for the independence legalization. Got to meet so many great people and connect with so many collective members. But ultimately we want to bring that back a little bit, and really, from my vantage point, it's been about spending the last year bringing these 2 licenses that are for profit, absolutely something that we want to connect with in the retail world and bring it to the market that way. But then we also want to use the product that we're growing and bring it into some manufactured goods through the manufacturing license. So look for that. I'll do a tour in the next week of retailers and really just try to start connect with folks that some I know, some we've sent our members to, and really just tried to help folks transition locally and connect so that they have the convenience of being local. Like, who wants an empire? I don't, right? And there are people that do, and they attack all the time. And I used to get sucked into that game, but I'm just beyond it now. And we all just have so much more important work to do than destroy each other. So from my vantage point, I'm sitting here thinking, let's just create some space. And to your your earlier thing, if you want to hook up in some way, man, we'd love to have you here for those to support your platform and whatever you want to bring to the mix. And we're going to be trying to bring folks in a branded capacity for sponsorships as well. So it's all like a thing that we could do collectively, and make really just a space where we get to do that communally. The private parties, you know, we have it all set up on our infusionary site. I think in your link or in your bio, I have my bundled together .com link. Everything that's in my world is there. So feel free, folks, if you want to go there, you know, reach out to me. I've had a few folks that, you know, through the years I've connected with that saw these things that we're doing here tonight, reach back out. So it's like absolutely heartwarming. It felt like such a reunion day today because last night I think I posted when we got our shit together, right? And so for all these folks to be circling back, man, I want to be bringing what we created this year to a lot of folks in these different retail spaces. So hopefully we can get everybody engaged. And if that can benefit what you're doing, man, I'd love to you know, do stuff. But that goes for everybody.
And let me cut you off because you said it's been a hard year, Glenn. And I was wondering if you would expand on that thought, because I've talked to a lot of, especially outdoor cultivators this year, who have talked about the struggles. I know there's just been a ton of fucking rain, but I'd like to hear maybe your perspective on how this season has gone.
You know, I think, Caleb, part of why I really appreciate you as a human being, we both have this neurodiverse thing, right? And cannabis is this thing that helps, you know, I'm not trying to out you, but I think, you know, you shared that with folks in the past and, you know, on this show. And, you know, as far as that social equity piece, whether you want to go there or not, man, we could talk all night.
Go ahead.
Parts, however you do it. You know, and so, you know, I want to make it, you know, in a sense, if you know, I don't know how many repeat guests you've had, but like, if, you know, if there's a way that we can be, you know, in a relationship with this community where we can host and really connect with people and bring good quality product to the mix, man, that's what I'm about right now. So the hospitality piece is kind of like we had 8 versions of it here at Meadow House, but through that collective, I was able to hook up with Momark, you know, and this is a farm tier 3 now, but we grew maybe 500 plants by the time we hit soil. You know, it was not the 625, right? So those are the numbers, and you know, we're not like full scaled out indoor, but we have a space to grow into. But the licensing part of it was just challenging because, you know, I had thought my business partner had done certain pieces kind of thing. Like the insurance, you chatted about that earlier, I think yesterday. And, you know, it's hard, man. Like, I don't want to be feeling like it's one of the most luxurious things that I could have imagined. And I'm not trying to like be glib or full, right? Insurance, like people don't understand it. Like when they're talking about 21% taxes, we could say this all night long. They don't understand that they're asking our community to work an extra day a week just to pay the tax. And, you know, that's a big one. So if we're literally in that space where, you know, all of it combined, it's such a penalty on us. You know, and so many, like, there's just so many things being asked of our community that no other industry has to go through. And then that revenue is being used to teach people about prevention. Like, it makes no sense to me, right? Because like, if the thing is funding everything, we want to kid ourselves about this child thing, right? And I just feel like we all need to be more grown up and adult about this, because we don't have those conversations with alcohol. But I'm not opposed to alcohol, right? You know, I mean, but that is part of the mix. Everything in this governmental world of looking at stuff is economics and trade-offs of who wins and who loses. You know, and I'm at that place when I've been at this, you know, for a while. And, you know, not just here in Vermont, like, you know, I grew up in New York and, you know, I was smoking when I was 14. And all of our collective, when you ask them the question, because I did the research, it's what I used to get paid big money for. And I'll get back to that hard year because it's not like right now, like raining money, but, you know, I also have a huge amount of faith. And I know we grew a great crop that's going to sustain us. I look forward to sharing it with everybody.
Can I ask you? Can I ask you? You said you have children, Glenn. How do you talk to your children about cannabis?
Yeah. I mean, look, the state educated my son and paid for his education to get a cannabis degree. You know, I'm so proud of that. He's, yeah, I'm proud of all three of my kids, man. I don't want to, like, you know, and they're all like going off to college. Thea, my youngest, is, you know, is a junior, and my middle child, Hadley, is a senior. Um, you know, and they're just doing great stuff. So I'm so super proud of them. And, you know, I think we all are as parents, but, you know, it's so absurd to see these conversations now when, you know, I understand where, you know, the education system is getting 14% of this tax, and I understand how we got here in the legislating of cannabis. Um, you know, I was a little apprehensive at first about that tax rate. I felt like 10% was the number, right? It was the number that it would have worked at. And a lot of us all said that. I was just the tip of the spear that was willing to bring it to the legislators in a website that nobody probably read. You know, I mean, people did, and I saw the metrics, but ultimately, you know, we had a model that was fully baked out in legal format that could have been passed and signed. But like, it wasn't about that. It was always about the committees. It was always about all the layers of authority that needs to sort of intervene, and ultimately, you know, who's got their hands out the most. And I was always complimentary of public safety because they weren't asking for a shit ton of money. And even when they were told that, like, you know, I forget, it wasn't the body cameras, it was the DNA testing. I mean, this, like, there's really good people in Montpelier that, you know, I could shout out everybody, but I don't
Right.
want
Well,
to
they
get into
wanted
a name.
they wanted to do saliva testing, right? On
Exactly.
people.
Yeah, I might have said DNA, but the saliva testing, right, is
Well,
ultimately that Dick Sears made the point of, like, now we're talking about, do we have a database of DNA? And, you know, without getting too into the weeds of it all, there were needed elements of that conversation in Montpelier, but there was also elements where people, for instance, House Judiciary Chair Maxine Grad, I felt were stalling things. And, you know, it was frustrating that we were in a place where I had national people, and I'm still connected with them on LinkedIn, and really good people that I think, as you're starting to expand your audience, man, it's great to see. You know, I think you guys are talking about just folks, I won't drop names, but like folks that I know through that world of, you know, national cannabis solicitation. Like, we were trying to bring money to the state, and not multi-state operators, what we see now, but like actual players of companies that could have bent the curve on the economic development of Vermont. And I was always advocating for small farms, but then you get like fiefdom people that want to just be like, wait, what about, you know, our commercial real estate? And I could go there all night, but it's not necessarily for me worth pinpointing all the, like, this is what I thought and they did it wrong. I think what would be really cool, and if you're down for it in the future, I would love to work with some of our collective members that write long form, not just books, but screenplays, and using all of your work, man, like your research and a lot of your film and our community. You know, we all have stories. I feel like those stories can be brought out in a longer format that gives nuance, right? Because I
let
can take.
me. Can I cut you off for a second? Because you were talking about how this sort of played out in the legislature, and I think maybe our governor sort of kicked this can a ways down the road, and we could have been doing this a long time ago if it weren't for some of the elected officials that really held this up, in my opinion.
You know, I kind of remember when and you might have been in on that conversation of what the CCB was working on before, um, you know, before my recollection. But I kind of
Yeah, and
remember.
I'm not talking about the CCB
No,
either.
no, going backwards.
Those are appointed officials. I'm talking about the elected officials that really held this up. And I was watching other states legalize cannabis before us, even though I think they also fucked it up. But I really feel like you know, Phil Scott held up the line for a while.
Yeah, I mean, and I think though where I was going with it was I thought it was evidence in the early CCB meetings. You know, so early on, I was at a lot of those, just straight up going to each of those virtually. Which, man, I gotta say, like, pandemics, horrible, like, but if there's one like really great thing of all of this, it's this virtual participation thing, man. And I think, ultimately, I've been able to do some things, whether it's like a jury draw by phone because I had ice weather here, and that happened 2 years ago. But, participating in those board meetings, I could see some of the things they were working on in subsequent, okay, here's what we inherited. This is the statutes. How do we make it real? And they had consultants, as well as anybody that was in those meetings or have reviewed them or watched them in replay. There was just so many different perspectives, right? So they were kind of like riding these like wild horses going in every direction. Whether Scott delayed, they all had reasons for why they made their moves. I would argue some of the things that were packed into some of those bills that came to him were really dangerous. But that's one man's opinion. And, I'm not trying to give him a free ride or anybody per se. I feel like it should have been done way long ago. But let's remember, Vermont is here now. And where's the rest of the country? But, then it's a two-party thing where I kind of feel like there's a lot of horse trading happening. That's just basically, we don't get a choice. It's just like, we're going to roll out this year. That state's going to go this year. That state's going to go. They have it all chopped up. And I felt like a lot of the stuff that was being pushed at us was dumbed down specifically to drag us out, keep things like potency caps, keep things like that everybody knows is just stupid because it makes the innovation horrible. Right?
Do you want to stop for a second and talk about the THC caps? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, have you met somebody or heard from somebody that hasn't had an issue with it?
I've never met. Here's the deal. I've been interviewing people for almost 2 years now. I've done almost 200 interviews, and I've never met anybody from the industry who said, "Oh yeah, I really like that rule."
Yeah, I mean, and that's the reality, right? Because you're on the pulse, and I think the questions that seem to percolate a lot are the ones that really I think people are wrestling with. Like, how do I possibly go into the market when I know that I might be, firing up too hard? And it's like, I can't, legitimately take that risk when their profit already is significant enough to make sure that they're okay and taking care of family and doing their thing. So, that's where I feel like there's just some pieces that were packed in there so that maybe it would allow West Coast to jump ahead. Some of the other folks that might have a deeper infrastructure in place, it might have benefited more of a corporate clientele that would be more apt to donate to political parties at a national level, right? And then see the rewards of where things get developed in which local communities. I'm not going to chase all the data, right? And for every single industry, there's like, I think, 15 things that you could pick apart as patterns that are exploitable under the wrong hands, or gifts to democracy in the right hands. And like, we could talk water, whatever you want to do is
we're gonna get into the water. I did have a couple more questions before that. That's a big one here that I want to do, Glenn. But you also mentioned, and I've seen a number of your comments to the CCB in the public comments sections. I would like to know, and this is a question I ask everybody, is that if you could rewrite the legislation. Glenn left. Well, shit. Wait. Hey, Glenn, are you back? Hey.
Ooh, yeah. Hey.
I lost you there for a second. Okay, cool. No worries, man. So the question is, if you could rewrite the legislation for cannabis legalization in Vermont, what would you add? What would you delete? Or maybe what would you change in there?
There's so many pieces, Caleb, that I think the CCB got right given what they had to work with. And I think there's a lot that can be improved. So I guess from a larger perspective, let's just, obviously potency caps, but let's just say farm stand sales. Like, I want to support the retail market 100%. Like, I come from a world of marketing on some level but I'm so disenfranchised with the advertising model that I find myself cheering on a billionaire like Musk who's saying, go fuck yourself to the advertisers, right? Because it's powerful, man. We're being led down a road where like you're apprehensive to like take something because you're afraid that it might signify you're in somebody's pocket, right? Like there's conflicts of interest, and then there's, you know, something that is just kind of being human. And it's not, I think, in a space where we're like, how do I put it? I just feel like, you know, we're in a space where we can create product and work with retailers in really interesting marketing models, like where we could tap into our hospitality. And I'm hoping to do that to be like for profit, but I don't want it to come at somebody else's expense, right? So I want to try to make it more communal, bring people together, do some fun stuff. But more importantly, I want to tie it into a purpose, which is our Kinship Certified, right? If we're doing those pieces, I feel good about making money, and I want more people to make money, you know? And I think that's where we all get disconnected, because there's so many people chasing empires that they see themselves owning all the dispensaries in the state. And then, you know, you get to that point where other people are like, wait, how much is your money from here and there and that person here? And, you know, so maybe that, like, what they got right, I think, is being able to say, look, disclose all of the people involved, um, you know, over 10%, right? So understanding equity partnerships, I think, is very transparent. But on the flip side, there's a lot of people that do the 9.99% team up, put all their money together and, you know, exploit stuff. I'm not going to try to call anybody out. I want to try to put our product into places that
I will. Yeah.
But like, and this is key, man, because like I'll drift, and you know, remember, like I have ADD. This is my medicine. I could be smoking.
I know, Glenn.
But like,
And you know, but I appreciate that you made that point, because that was one of the 10% rule, to me, was clearly a way for maybe rich people to hide their equity into big companies here.
yeah, and I think we can easily though figure out, based on those patterns, how many people are double dipping in these weird ways, and it all figures itself out. And I think having folks do the diligence to like kind of really say, wait, what's ethical? You know, and I think ultimately for me, I don't want to be part of something making money where there isn't a what I call the Ouroboros model, the dragon eating its own tail. I have a tattoo of an Ouroboros, right? The idea that like I can give away product to the people most vulnerable that fucking need it, right? I have cancer patients that can't afford it, and I'm being told by government that like I can't grow a fucking plant and save their lives. This is still in America today in some states. You know this, man. I'm not trying to preach. Well, yeah, I guess I am. You know?
Go ahead, Glenn. That's why I got you on the show here.
I appreciate it, man. You know, and I think I want to represent as best I can. I don't want to be this like hostile, like I'm angry at everybody, because I'm not, you know, none of us are, but we get spun up by a lot of legislators that, you know, their money pit isn't in cannabis. So what are they doing? They're trying to work all the other angles until they know they can get a cut of it for their thing, and then they're safe, right? So how many people are really going to hold folks accountable to the fact of like, are you willing to pay that 14% tax, right? Like, I don't want to not see our fucking kids get a good education. My 3 kids went to the local high school here that, you know, Noah went to, right? I raised my kids to think for themselves. And I think critical thinking is so important. So when the government is trying to tell me that, like, I'm on a record as saying I want to see a increase in per capita spending per student in Vermont today. And I'm not trying to get political, but it's not that I want to see our industry saddled with the have to pay for it, because otherwise you're labeled as like anti-schools, you know?
Well, let me ask you. I'd like to get into it because I've seen some of the speeches by the Vermont Department of Health, and I know that they're funneling some of the excise tax back into Department of Health, up to $10 million a year in excise tax for their educational programs. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on their educational programs. I'll tell you right now, I think it's still very much based in the reefer madness. And a lot of this education, I think, is coming from people that really don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I want to pick your brain on that too, Caleb, because like, let me just circle back too, because when, again, I will drift in places, but I'll try to come back to them, when the public safety asked for money, they asked for a modest amount, right? When the other departments and agencies asked, they were all asked to itemize it. Like, how would you set up the startup for this? And they all came in with good numbers. Education came in with like $8 million. Like, it was some crazy number compared to the like 300,000 for public, or like, I forget, it was like 1.4 million with 300,000 being this like discretionary test thing, right? And that came off the books. But it was just one of these things where you're like, they're not even in touch with what our community's about. And worse, they're wanting to, on so many levels, utilize big pharma for our, I don't want to say our population, but as somebody that's neurodiverse, I've seen, and, I've very specifically met with hundreds of neurodiverse patients and people and members and friends, and we talk to connect and understand, well, wait a minute, what are we all experiencing? It's the same thing you're doing with cannabis, right? But it's all because we utilize cannabis. So when we talk genetics later, there's some people that are very specifically, I don't want to out people and talk about people outside of this world per se, but people in the neurodiverse world that are making strains over in New Hampshire. And, I'm inspired to do the same here. For now, we've done some genetics work, which I'll tap into, but, we were always able to sit as a collective and get feedback. So if folks that are neurodiverse are telling me, this headband is working on, it's primo, it's doing things, then I'm getting input on I'll give a shout out to some local chocolate, or, like if somebody's throwing some Ken Dog, and, all of those things have been documented and significantly detailed across a continuum of subjects that are people, and we're literally seeing impacts in ways that we can modify on a very specific level. And instead, this education system's like, no, it has no merit. There's no validity to it. Do it this way. And at the same point, I'm not, opposed to many of pharma's contributions, right? But I'm not beholden to it either. And, that's a dangerous place where government people want to have it easy. They want to have their campaign dollars. They want it, the packages all locked up. The parties sealed the deal. They push it down to their people. And, really, like, that's the mechanics of it. Like, how many less than 1,000 legislators in DC on a national level? How many 2,000-3,000 lobbyists that live on, K Street? Like, you know what I mean? Like, the disproportional reality of how we're shaping legislation, and then, I'll try to curtail it back a bit here and frame it back to you, because I do want to hear you.
No, I liked where you were headed with that. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I had the bomb squad, Vermont State Troopers bomb team here, disposal unit this summer. And, we had somebody try to put a Molotov cocktail on my house. I'm trying to move everything forward. I'm not trying to play into drama. But, these, when they're telling me that cannabis, this is a thing that the control board is handling. When it crosses the line, though, into that other world, that's the reality of this gray space. So, it's not just like the legislator is getting it wrong, or the board not adjusting fast enough, or pressuring, legislators and saying, hey, look, you're not giving us the tools we need to get this better and transition the market faster. There's a push and pull dynamic that a lot of people don't even understand of how not just Montpelier works, but this, bigger fabric of our democracy. So, I had some understanding of it. I've tried to push levers in different directions, but probably not, so well. But, when the state troopers are in your house talking to you about that, and you're realizing that, well, this is a whole different world. Back in the 90s in the old North End, when we were growing Northern Lights, it was, we're bringing second generation, third generation clones from Colorado and Cali. And, I mean, that was like, there's a fear of the DEA coming down on you, man. Like, you could walk home, and you're looking at your roof and it's all melted and all the neighbors' roofs are not, man. That's a moment, right? When you're like, go fucking buy insulation now. And that's when everybody's talking about, like, the DEA is parked out over in this place. It was heady times. So, I think a lot of folks that are really monetizing and strategically benefiting in the industry today, it's great to see, right? Because I want to be proud of Vermont and Vermont growers, and I want to be part of that scene of contributing fire. And I've tried to engage a lot of local growers and bring local talent into a profile of other people's recognition. Because, there's a lot of great growers, but if you know growers, man, they love to fucking just be in their space and talk to their plants, right? And I do this as well. But
Well,
sometimes,
that's a great point, Glenn. I met a lot of amazing growers. I've met a lot of super sharp business people, but when you combine the two into this market where you now have to deal with all this compliance from the state and all the labeling and packaging and all that shit, it's hard to find people that are good at both of those things.
yeah, but and this is where I'm starting to understand the organic nature of free market economics, right? Because you're sort of bringing some of these people to the mix, showcasing some people's talents. I'm picking up off of that. Other people are picking up off of other people's stuff. Eventually, what was primed to look very just so will become more organic. I think we all were advocating for it to be more organic straight out. But I think on some level, a lot of the younger folks in the mix now, I think to Joel's point, aren't really. I think there's a lot of older legacy folks feeling left out. I'm pretty excited about the youth, but I also have a son who is excited about this, and he learned how to grow on the state government's dollar, right? So I can't be blamed for that, but I've had him able to intern when we were growing hemp, and it was like, there isn't a better experience than to be working with your family and small farms. That's what we were advocating for with the whole retail farm stand, right? So bringing that full circle back around, and I'm stoked to get involved with lots of retail and really be in markets of urban centers. But man, I don't want to do it if small farms that are struggling to get that bandwidth, that marketing space, and that's why I'm excited to try to open this place up, because we've been able to do that and be able to have 200-300 people here hanging out, doing a party, so that people get to learn off of what each other's stuff is. And it's just a group collaborative thing. But, it's one of those spaces where, I have a lot of respect for the shoulders that, I was standing on, and I'm trying to make way for folks to also get, benefits from what we've brought to the table. But, so long as folks like my son's generation and my daughter's, they're going to grow into this. I feel like there's a whole group of people that don't even want to talk about kids in the bigger sense, man. Like I told you, I was smoking when I was 14, 15. Our average age is 15 of our collective. So, if you really want to, yeah, right. Man, if you ask the question to all of your guests going forward, I guarantee you we'll find somewhere around 15 is the number. Statistically,
I started smoking when I was 12 or 13, which I don't recommend to any of the kids out there, but that is what happened.
Yeah. And, Vermont's definitely a different space, because I think we had, there's a lot of back to the earth hippies that moved here. I think there's a lot of family, part of where I think a lot of our collective is coming to us. We've had just families connect, like adult families, and come here, and on 420s, doing dabs with some friends, and to actually, I just heard from them today, on the social media front, and it's this great family that I was able to connect with a collective grower, and so they're now growing, and I'm looking in a growers forum of Vermont growers randomly, and there's this amazing big ass bud that is grown by somebody that had asked me to connect them with a grower, and I'm not going to drop names because it's just not worth it, but it's so beautiful to see when those connections fire off, and then people are actually feeling really good about how they're able to grow. Yeah, and I know there's a lot of retail store folks, that are selling grow gear, that they see this, they have those conversations, forum. It's just all of those pieces of the social connection, I think, happen in all these beautiful conversations and discussions that I was speaking about earlier. for our for our community, I think much more so because, we're not trying to force it just so. I love getting high and going to music, man. Like Zen Bar, listen to those guys, like the Ano Collective, right? One of the New Year's parties that it was like one of their first New Year's there, like band I was playing in, we played there for New Year's. And that was fun, is that community vibe. But for me, it's not just about getting high and going to concerts, because that's a given, of course, right? I saw Ben Harper with my son at Higher Ground. Friends that work there got married here. There's all these relationships with people that are special to me in my world that I love sharing this place, but I also love going to these other locations. And so to see Ben Harper there with my son, and yeah, I was fucking lit. Am I gonna fess up and say it wasn't anything bad? No, it was a fantastic experience of family. And my son got to see, some just beautiful music. So, I think those are the things where I probably are. I'm a bit more, not a target, but like I think there's just some folks that are a little bit more old school about how they want to do. Like you talk about, man, like that propaganda films, man. Like when does it end? Oh my God, the death weed, devil's lettuce, right? So, on some level, I'm the guy willing to say,
Or
look,
does I think the real
what's that?
the real question is, does it ever end? You said, when does it end? I don't know if it ever ends. It seems like it just keeps coming, and it's
Well, I think,
a
that's
lot
what
of
I'm
that
like.
stuff, in my opinion.
I kind of feel like it's up to us to make it end, man. Like mature conversations, just absolute, honest, authentic product that makes people feel inspired to create good art, good work, to be good people to each other. All of that is like something that I've found healing through. Our neurodiverse community, I could talk about, all kinds of pieces of that equation, not just organic healing through a plant. There's roots, there's fungi, there's everything, mineral water. I got into making infusions here because with dandelion root, my sister-in-law had cancer. And so I was looking for a way to help her with digestion systems. And so, it never really came to, oh my God, I'm making a product that's dandelion root extract infused drinks, but I had them here, you know, for a little period, and it was a good thing. I don't know if it would be a thing in the market we'd ever get past the FDA. But it was
So
one of those.
Glenn, let me really in here a little, because I wanted to ask you about the water stuff and the infusion rate. It sounds like, and you had never told me that story before, which was slightly touching there, man. And is that part of the reason behind why you started the infusion rate?
Oh, about my sister-in-law, yeah. Uh, no, I mean it's not. I mean, I'll be honest. That was when I really connected with CBD, and the idea that here we are. I know that this drink, if I was to really get some pieces together, could potentially be the thing that would help someone. Now, granted, she had a great recovery, and things are in remission, so it wasn't like we had to like figure some crazy stuff out. But I think it was for me a revelation where I was like, wait a second, what if, right? I mean, we know all the therapeutic benefits of CBD. There's just we could all reiterate those stories that we've all seen in mainstream, but we were being so hand tied as far as what we could do to bring to market, and much less just grow.
So you had a hemp license as well.
Yeah, so I had a hemp license here at Meadow House for I think it was like 2 or 3 years. We also were doing primarily hemp farming at Momark over at the Davis Farm. It's a multi-generational dairy farm. I'm so honored and privileged to be part of this family's, farm. It's a small farm. It's dairy. It was the farm that when I came to Waterbury back in, I think it was like '93. I stopped at the cow crossing where Mark's dad, Maurice, was crossing the cows, and it got me to just sit back for a minute and look up at the Worcester Range and look at these pastures. And it was just one of those moments my heart felt home. Like this place was home. As a founder of the Worcester Range Collective, I'd always felt that grounding with this space. So it's really important for me to be a caretaker to it. whether it's my farm or any of our collective members' spaces. So as a consultant, I was brought in mostly to help them bring their farm into that space, and worked with a number of local folks. Some things went fantastic, and some, like any business, has issues, especially when you're dealing with our industry. So I'm not going to rehash stuff. I think Joel was on point the other night. Sometimes you just let sleeping dogs lie. We all have history and past where I think sometimes things don't play out, where you have the rug pulled out from you because government decided to take an extra year or 2 or 5 to get, just to a point where you don't get arrested. Um, my history, I definitely was young in New York when I started smoking, cut forward college, stepped away for a while, got married, the kids, all of that, still kind of putting the growth thing together. But it was always a risk. So if you're having kids, like, I just saw so many lives disrupted and, torn apart. And, I think that was why I was involved in the pro bono work with the Defender General's office, to help those that didn't have representation of legal help, because it was just such an injustice. And not to get off too far, but like, we're at a place now where with Momark, I'm able to, create this space where hopefully we can, grow more cannabis, not just outdoor, but indoor, specifically our Catamount Kush strain, which is a cross of cat piss and a bow Kush. It's just a beautiful thing that I invested in to try to work with some folks to get us to a place where, it was something that as a Kush is going to, hit all the notes as far as being in a terroir that, it's just, you got multi-generations of cows fertilizing it. It's not hard as far as understanding the NPK. There's just little microclimates to it, understanding which plants will go better where. It's been like 4 years of just understanding with hemp, what we can do with THC. Whereas some people were all in and like trying to produce volumes upon volumes of hemp. I wanted to have us set up to be able to do volumes and volumes, right? But in a way, knowing that that was a setup for the THC component. And if we could have, like at the time, it wasn't even like, a notion of what's a tier, like it was still being worked out. And, finally just settled on a tier 3 indoor outdoor because we thought, well, 625 plants, we could do something with that.
So you got the mixed.
Yeah. So we did the, we were late this year. There was, we could talk, there was some of the things we talked about previously about the delays in licensing. That was some of my hardship this year. I had to jump in, find insurance. We had a July 1st deadline. It just, everything was compounding, but we've connected with some great people, and happy to share contacts and leads. And, I don't want to gloat, but like having that insurance is just such a thing, man. Like it really, it changes the dynamic when, people are trying to like literally try to off you, and you got a crop that, you're trying to bring somebody in to be the lead grower, because that wasn't ever part of my, job description. I wasn't trying to put myself into that ego role, right? And I think some people see it that way, and, it got into a weird space where I want just folks to know that the kinship certification is just a vetting of how we all interact. And at a certain point, people make moves for people because we care about each other. There is no need to like bring the gray market into this new space, and that's where I think we're committed to family. Like, so, I could tell you about the comfort I found, July of being stalked in a 12 gauge, but at the same point, you got to really wrap your head around once you have a no stalking order, and so does your son who's half your age. Are you prepared to pull a trigger on someone that's walking on your property? And these are heavy things that, like, when we were not even close to being regulated, you have a bunch of people talking about gun control. And like, we don't have the luxury of turning to the police and saying, hey, can you come and help us out? Man, this is really weird. So, I got off track, but like when I'm sitting there with a bomb unit, in my living room, and it's a turn, man, because like some of the worst cartel, they're like sitting in our government. And some of the best people are in our protection and serving of us, and they're being like having their hand, like I'm not going to be advocating for those people that threw a lot of my friends in jail and roughed up a bunch of people, including myself, in the past. But I know a lot of people that are on those lines that deal with stuff that you don't want to see. None of us do. And so I always try to keep a balanced, nuanced perspective. I think the long format is going to get us there, where when we start seeing the different sides of all of this debate, how legalization unfolded, what was hot for me was different for somebody else. Why was it important for me? Why was it different for somebody else? There's different reasons. And the older I get, the more I understand that, like, we don't know it all. Nobody does. And, the most we can do is try to provide the best that we can. And, I don't want to be, saying fuck you to all the cartels in the world and trying to tell all the, governments to piss off because I'm anti-authoritarian. But I fucking love Hunter S. Thompson, right? You're quoting him too, right? But I don't want to play into that either as far as setting the mood for my kids. And I've seen too many heroin junkies end up friends dead, right? And others that were pushed onto the hospital emergency room doors, right? And that's not a glamorous life that I want my kids repeating. And, I knew when to get out from some bad situations that for whatever reason I'm here now today. There were people that weren't, man, and we overlap as an industry. So, I'm never going to doubt someone's judgment unless they prove to me that I should doubt it. But I think there's a lot of stuff that's happened that I've now learned I have to turn how I think about it, because it's so vastly different than like even back in 2010, 2011, 2012, when, I remember being a parent as a solo parent, post-divorce. Like, I won't get into too much of that past, but like, you're going to Dick's Sporting Goods just to get your daughter some bathing suits, and you're being watched by the staff because they're not used to seeing a dad bringing their daughters to get bathing suits. And quite frankly, I felt good about that, knowing if my daughters were in a situation of harm, but like, there's a lot of stuff that the generations before us, like, I don't think anybody in the boomer generation remembers what it's like to actually have a diaper changing mat in an airplane, like when JetBlue was first doing it, because I was trying to play the part, man. I was doing all this gender research for bar associations. I was trying to understand my impact as a man in this world. And, as far as raising kids, man, that was like, it was a space of pioneering that I think my generation went through, because I just know a lot of the, dads that did that work. And, I'm grateful for it because I got kids that are like phenomenal. So to your earlier question about all those things.
Wasn't my dad.
But yeah, and like when you're talking about like the those folks in the health department and public safety and like all the dogma, I look at it and I'm like, well, I just have to now show my kids because they're like 18, 19, 21. Like, they're at that space where they're their own human beings, and I feel like they came out pretty damn well. So I'm willing to let the walk do the talking, because if you want to blame me as a parent for helping my son figure out that cannabis was good for him because of the anxiety he was going through because of shit that was going on in a divorce, man, like, and a lot of other pieces that I don't really want to get into now, and really truly want to like move forward with positivity. But I think a lot of that time is so much different now than it was back then. And I guess I would turn it back to you and say, where are you seeing some of those pieces, not just in the legislation itself, but like the resistance, right? The other side of what is good common practice. Like, are there people actually saying, yeah, let's keep the tax at 21%? Is it,
well, a lot of the worst things that I've seen personally, and this is my opinion, is from Department of Health. And the front groups that they formed, the Vermont Medical Society, some of these groups, they just cherry pick a lot of studies. And I know they cherry pick them because I've read through some of the studies that they quote, and they do a terrible job. They either don't know how to analyze results of the findings of a study, or they're intentionally misrepresenting them. And in either case, I'm really bothered by that. They always pick the most negative shit and then they put it out there like, oh, on the label, you have to say, oh, this is going to might cause psychosis or something. Like, get the fuck out of here. But meanwhile, they give Adderall to school children that are like 7 years old, and those are amphetamines. And to me, it makes it hard to take the state seriously when they talk about concerns from cannabis.
Yeah, you're spot on, man. And specifically, like in those reports, are you seeing anything in the last 2, 3, 5 years that you could say based on trending and legal states like Colorado, California, all of them, man, right? Like, are we seeing new information, or you're seeing the same old stuff that's brought out?
Well, I'm seeing some new information in terms of some sketchy lab testing going on. But, I think in the states that have legalized, I've actually seen some studies in major publications that say, oh, kids are actually not getting more access to cannabis in states that legalize. Like, oh, no kidding.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's all the stuff that I'm seeing as well, right? Like, so all the literature that's being presented, it's almost making me feel like I should tune out. But like, it's good to know that there are folks still staying on top of this. And I think there's like, man, I feel like I did service for a little bit there. I had to like tap out because it was just exhausting. And I think a lot of us have gone through that where, you do a little time on the tip of the spear and then you got to tap out because it's just too much. But, I see you digging and staying on top of that. And that's going to be critical, man. And like, I hope we can keep recruiting that as not just like independent collectives and groups throughout the state, but rather as, just a larger, just unified, maybe it's through the CCB as well. They have these hotlines where you can report on somebody, which is valid too. I mean, if people want to do that, but the flip side is like, there should be a way that you can say, well, wait, how do we fast track some of this really insane shit? Like if they're seeing 50 comments every month about concentration caps, like, and then you got to say, well, wait a minute, are we just appeasing a group of people that want to be stubborn and delay? And then is it worth really outing them in a more concentrated way? Party politics will always stop that. But I don't know. What do you think, man? Like, what's the best approach?
I don't fucking know. The best approach is to have people in the government that actually understand cannabis. And in my opinion, there's just really not. And word up to David Templeman, who's been on the show. He's the only licensed cultivator in the Vermont legislature, I believe. Dave's all right, but most of the people involved in this, including, and hey, I like the CCB, but and right up to Kyle, he's got a little weed experience, but James Pepper don't have no experience. Julie don't have no experience. The Marijuana Commission, they didn't have no experience. That was a bunch of bankers and cops and lawyers. The nominating committee, they didn't have any experience. The consulting firms that they hired, in my opinion, didn't have any experience. And, I think the results kind of speak for themselves, man. I thought there should have been more growers and manufacturers and retailers or some people in those seats that were framing this whole market out.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we teach our kids in schools that benefit from our 14% in taxes that, like, we have democracy in action, and it always includes representation of, taxation and things like that. But, these are the things that, like, for me, I used to work, in the world of the bar association, well, associations in general, right? Oh, man, I sent this text, or I'll make it quick, but like, the boarding school thing, right? Like in LinkedIn, how you can like see where people have been sort of checking you out kind of thing, and I have from my past in the Dihedral Group as a consultant, like just all these folks that check me out. And, and it's not like, sometimes it's just keyword searches and stuff, right? But I got this thing from somebody from the National Boarding Schools Association or something like that. And it reminded me, man, education, because ultimately, like back in high school, I was sending cannabis through the mail to boarding schools, and it was one of these things where, I had really good hookups that were friends of mine who were in the local public school. We all went to independent schools before that, And I think where some people really get caught up in these like public-private debates, I think is wedge issue shit. So that there's a reason why that 14% sticks, because it hits the code of like every human. Like, man, that's my fucking alumni you're talking about. You want to take money away? They won't hear the fact that you might advocate for more money per student, right? So that's where I'm like, look, if you want to have more money per student, and I do, not just for my kids because they're almost out of the school system, but like I don't want to see it financed through like a municipal bond mechanism, right? Because then that's like we're beholden to a federal, institution that isn't necessarily going to forgive that
Mhm.
debt if a local municipality can't actually pay it. And then what happens? Well, you force foreclosures and evictions so that you can turn that property around and bring it back into property tax paying status, right? These are obvious things that we know, but like we're doing it because passive aggressive freaks are wanting to push an agenda, and then they greenlight it or greenwash it and say, but it's for the kids, right? But they're making us pay for it on the back end with a 14% tithing. Like, I'm not opposed to the education system, but they're just so out of a line with everything that, like, they haven't curtailed hiring because of the actual demographic decrease. We know 5% of all the Northeast is in a decline mode. So, we're pushing the idea that education should be this thing that's so pensioned because it's government employees. And I'm not going to be the guy that advocates against unions. I've always been for, people working together, unionizing to make sure that fucking asshole corporations aren't taking advantage of them. But then you start to understand the mechanisms of the people running the organizations that are running the unions that are doing, and it becomes a mind fuck where you see like DAs literally going into insane asylums, and just this. There's I sat in on an ethics commission meeting 3-4 weeks ago, and it's so unenforceable in Vermont, right? So it was something Anthony Polina, had pushed for a very long time, and I was really, glad to see. I was a huge champion of it as well, and I think having worked for the American Bar Association, the Center for Professional Responsibility, I used to do a lot of research in ethics among the legal profession, and so I understand the space enough that what I see happening is challenging, right? So to bring it a little bit into a swirl to what you're talking about with water, if we're talking about the displacement of
Yeah, well, here's the thing, Glenn.
yeah, man.
Water's my last question. I want to do. Hang on, before you do that, I want to just do another shameless
Yeah,
slap
do it.
here. I'm with Glenn Andersen, the Vermont Collective, Momark Farms Kinship Certified. Glenn, I want to thank you so much for being here with me. This fascinating conversation, man, and it's good to catch up with you. And
Right
the
on.
last thing I want to ask you about is the water rights, because the first time I ever spoke to you when we met January and a half ago, whenever it was, it seemed to be a heavy topic on your mind. And I've been reading a lot about the water quality also in Vermont. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one, man.
Yeah, man. Gratitude too for having me on. I really just want to reiterate. I'm going to try to make a round and connect with people. So I look forward to sharing, and really appreciate you helping give us a platform to get that out about Mumark. And hopefully we can connect. We have all kinds of marketing tiers to try to get people understanding the hospitality that comes along with some sponsorship and some purchases. And so I'm trying to create a space where it'll be for a lot of us to really not hack the advertising pains. Like if we were really picking apart the legislation like we were before, that's a huge one, right? Because if you're saying to a group of people, pay more money, all these hardships that come with it, as far as enforcement, targeting you in different ways, or just having to rewrite the script of being targeted by a whole system. And now you're on the front side where you're paying for it, but you're not really being respected for it, right? All of this transition is going to take time. From a water perspective, I just would throw it back around having had people try to gaslight me as like some Scrooge McMoneybucks and farm, and you're keeping water from the people. When I knew that there was play in place for a $16 billion restructure that would have basically created bottled water that would have been exported out of a watershed basin. I really believe in like security of water for all, and it is a human right. It's different than what we know of as public water. And while Biden's talking about a $10 billion reinfrastructure, pipeline upgrade nationally, I mean, there's still people without access to running water. But we don't talk about it from the, is it sustainable to build here? Do we have enough water for that? I grew up in the Catskills, Long Island and the Catskills, and just spent a lot of time there. You got all of Manhattan being fed by the reservoirs in New York. Puts a lot of pressure on those upstate communities to fall into a compliant state, and curtail who and what they're about for a group of people that are benefiting from it because they're selling commercial real estate at jacked up prices to people that can't afford to live in 300 square feet. This is the reality that we live in. So where we use pipelines as a metaphor, profits are being redistributed, whether it's oil, gas, or water. And water is the biggest addiction humans have, right? 60 to 7% of us, that's our vessel holds this water. So I'm a huge advocate for clean water. I'm a huge advocate for water security for all as a human right. I've been fighting for that, but I've been also targeted on the other side of that, where it's like, oh, you're just trying to, hurt development and use that as a thing. Because but I saw a period of time where I had a timber stand that was adjacent to a water extraction area. And this is all settled. Like, we figured this stuff out this year. I've resolved things with, this municipality in the municipality of Waterbury that used to be the village that now is serving parts of the village, but I don't have a vote in. And, we could have big conversations about, and these are things I shared with the Ethics Commission.
Well, and I see there's that big Ben and Jerry's plant. I assume they're sucking up a ton of water down there.
Yeah, man. If you go through the comments of social media from many years, man, I was ripping on those guys. But I knew stuff too coming into it from folks back in the 80s that had moved here, family friends, and stuff that, I was already kind of like, wait, what's up? And then I started to understand, there's a economic group called Revitalizing Waterbury in this community. And I'm not going to try to hate on anybody. I really want to grow and do fantastic things with so many of our people that live in this community, both here in the center, downtown, in the village, former village. It's a place where we have 3 dispensaries right now. Whether we end up having one for our collective or not is almost inconsequential. I kind of want to be on the next level, like a social space where, my kids can have a safe space to be part of a family business. Where we're able to offer products from a whole bunch of great Vermont farms, and not because we're replacing a retail, but maybe we're doing a partnership thing, or there's a thing where we can, reconnect a tour of all of these different places so that the people that are coming here are enjoying that. But I don't want to see more cars being pushed into these recreational corners, like where we're at. I'm up in the, nowhere. We're right by the Mount Hunger trailhead. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a big,
it's a beautiful spot. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love sharing it, so I want to make sure that people understand. Go to our website, check out, Vermont Collective. I'll try to link to it. But at Meadow House, we're going to be doing this thing. It's private parties so that we're in compliance, that we can do the advertising. But, the thing about the water is there's people that want it to be drama. And I'm basically saying, we resolve that drama. But the really key thing to understand going forward, they changed laws this year. This relative to this fraudulent deed that's in the land conveyances section of the Vermont statutes. And it was something where I was saying, look, there's this profit piece of that law that got kind of pulled out, and it shifted a little bit. And it was something that nobody really used, but I was trying to hold people's feet accountable. And I wanted to understand, if in fact people are going to be extracting water out of this community and then not realize that they took a $40,000 timber stand and dried it up on my property to the point where it failed. Bark beetles came in, and that happens not just at my microcosm, but multiply that across the country. Think about that level of, people manipulating realities, and we're settled. So I can't really talk too much about it. There's some pieces I thought it was done deal with our Kinship. Effectively it's a religious organization. It's all tax exempt. I've done, federal filings. I have the EIN. We've done all the paperwork. It's not a farce. I'm not trying to create, the church of the hallucinogenic trip fest, but we absolutely want trip trails because like healing for PTSD comes with people feeling good, but also in a space where it's not so normal. And we can do that here. I want to be part of that, right? And there's a lot of people that I think want to make it super clinical. There's other people that want to reinvent it. And I don't want to try to influence legislation anymore. I got so tired of it. I just understand laws now. We chatted about farming, right? Farming is a tenet of our Constitution as much as religion is. And while we could look at it and say, oh, well, it's horrible because it's all these people that are evading taxes with big churches and, other people throwing bombs at other people because they're warring in other places in the world without getting too political. I'm not in it for that shit. I'm in it to try to create healing.
You're not trying to bomb people, Glenn?
It might sound like that sometimes with what I say and share, man, but like for real, it's I go with good intentions, man. I've had some bad stuff happen, but like I've just had so many good people step up and do really great things. And it's so infectious that like even while I'm trying to create a for-profit business that some think is so huge, it's not, man. I'm limited to a small staff because of a public building that we don't have. It's the farm and me, right? Until we make it a public building, which is a whole process that I could talk about, but it's not worth it, man. Fire marshal involved and all of it.
We're gonna split that up because I'm at the end of my shit here, and I'm gonna have to take a leak. But I want to do another, just a shameless slap. Glenn Andersen, the Vermont Collective, Momark Farms. Glenn, here, let me pull this up too. I was supposed to give a shout out to Amy Lems, who sent me this CBD body butter the other day. Thanks so much, Amy. I meant to do that at the beginning, but I'm super baked. But Glenn, I always save the last word for my guests. So if there's anything we missed or any shameless plugs or shout outs that you would like to give, now is the time. Thank you again for being here. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. And I'm going to come fucking see your ass sometime.
Yeah, dude, I want to get you. Like, can I show plant on material? Is this allowed to?
Yeah, this is the last word, dude. This is you, dude.
I mean, like, I want people to taste some of our catamount kush. I really want to like share the positive vibes of it. It was lovingly created. We've done some back crossing on it. We've stabilized it. It really works well in these climates. We have beautiful terroir. All those plugs aside, man, you can find us on bundledtogether.com. All my links are there. Really hoping to connect with people for the Kinship Certified piece of this because, it's really all the infrastructure of it is set up so that we are a governing body that allows us to do this thing outside of government together. And it's not like there's some like crazy, evangelical mission happening here. It's called baptism by fire and water. We get to sacrament together. We get to commune together. And, that's really where I'm going with it. It's not to try to evade laws or break laws. It's to create space where we can all heal. So, I want that to happen. But like, if we can get to a point where, we can interface here and do a little bit more communal gathering, man, that's where I want to be. And I want to make sure that our community benefits from it. So that it's not just like this perception of, I waited a while before getting licenses. I wanted everybody that needed the head start to get there, not because I try to, want to try to overcome anything. I just want it to be right when we succeed, that it's not at somebody else's loss. And if we do this right, great. We're all going to get together and do fun stuff. That's been my motivation. I hope I can inspire others in that sense because it's not fun when people are trying to kill each other. I'm not a huge gun proponent, but like I have to have one because I got to protect my family. At a certain point, that will change, but we want to be on the front line making organizations kinship certified so that we can say to our customers, our members, our people, we're doing this, like a full supply chain has been vetted. So, water as well, right? So, yeah, man, Caleb, thank you, dude. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'd love to be on whenever you need. Just fill some space. I'm here for you, man. It's great to see what you've been doing over the last couple of years. I know it's running long, so I'll just leave it there, man. Peace. I appreciate you.
Glenn Andersen, the Vermont Collective, Momark Farms. I'm your host, Caleb Teskey. Remember, the devil's in the details, and the details are in the fine print. Peace.